Welcome to WP Coffee Talk. Thank you to all of our sponsors, and especially to our espresso level sponsors, Helix Managed WordPress Hosting, for both their sponsorship and for hosting our site, and to Expander Digital for both their sponsorship and providing SEO services to us. Now enjoy the episode. Welcome to this episode of WP Coffee Talk. And I usually tell you that I know most people through Twitter or I've met them in person. And my next guest is Tim Toomey. And Tim and I actually have been in the same place at the same time, but that's not how we know each other. I think I know what I posted. I posted on Reddit a question asking people if they had embraced Gutenberg yet, yes or no. And Tim was like, not only have I embraced it, but wait till I tell you what me and my team have been working on. And so we actually started talking. We exchanged numbers, and I'm like, oh my God, dude, you have to be on my podcast. So this is where we are today. Tim, welcome to WP Coffee Talk.
Happy to be here.
Yeah, I'm happy to have you here. So I gave a little bit of a preview, but go ahead and tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do.
So I'm like a classic freelancer to tiny agency kind of, I guess, sort of trajectory. And now I'm overseeing a team of a handful of freelancers and one full-time person. And we essentially are a digital marketing agency, but we focus on mostly web design projects is probably where the majority of our work comes from. And then the other half of our agency is like building landing pages and doing online marketing for typically like music festival related things or events is kind of our bread and butter. But I mean, we have clients who are like dance studios and restaurants and I mean, we have Berkshire Hathaway companies. We have a pretty wide range of like weird customers, but like almost all of them in some capacity, we're doing something with a website or a place that they land on, which we typically work with WordPress.
That's awesome. What's your company called?
The company is called Covert 9, and there isn't 9 of us. There's 2 full-timers, 2 contractors, and 2 or 3 freelancers that we use. And most of us are in the Chicagoland area, but like my other full-time employee is in Seattle, and we've got someone who's in South Carolina. So we're kind of remote workers. So we're kind of a little bit like the WordPress team, I guess, in that way.
Yeah, WordPress, a lot of digital agencies nowadays are kind of remote that way. Some people like span lots of time zones in different countries and continents. And so you fit right in when it comes to that kind of thing, I guess, which is cool. Now I just
and I gotta put my hand up and say, I don't know if I agree with remote work. Like, I don't know if I like it even. It's still one of those things that like, I change my mind every day. Like some days I think it's great, but then there's times where I'm like, God, if we were all just in the same room for 1 hour, we could figure this out. But I think everyone's different in that opinion.
Absolutely. My team is what I call a hybrid. So we have 2 offices. We have one in San Diego, and then we have an office here in Rochester, New York. And that accounts for about half of our company. And the other half is working from wherever they are. So we've got people in India, we've got people in Mexico, California, New York, Pennsylvania, South Carolina, Florida, whatever. So we're all over the place. And it is nice when you can all actually physically be in the same place. So I don't know if that's happened for you yet, but WordCamp US last year was an opportunity for all of us to be in the same place. And it was almost magical, if I can use that word. It was cool.
Yeah, I mean, we usually do have 1 week a year where we all like make a point to be in Chicago at the office, and it coincides with one of our big clients' music festival that we all go to. So we do that, and but at the same time, when we are all together in that 1 week, very little work gets done, it seems like.
It's different work. It's It's the cohesion of your group and that's important too. So, it's awesome. It's a good thing. So show us your mug and tell us about why you chose the mug today that you got with you.
So this mug I chose because we have a set of them in the office, and they were handmade by one of our freelancers' friends that makes hand like clay and fires them on their own. So I wanted a red and black set to match like our color scheme. So they made me a set. So that's what I have.
Okay,
and right now there's just coffee in it. And I actually have the coffee too. I guess I should bring that up. It's called Gun Barrel Coffee. It's a veteran company, a veteran-owned company. And it's actually like, I'm not a coffee snob. I usually just drink Dunkin' Donuts. I think theirs is like the best. But for some reason, this coffee, like I really like it. I don't know why. It's probably just some I really don't know anything about it besides that it's like I just randomly got it, and now they mail me it like every month, and it's great.
Oh, that's awesome. Well, I have my Wonder Woman mug, and anybody who knows me or has seen the site or seen anything about me and my
I've seen the
Twitter
pictures.
account, yes, I am all about the Wonder Woman. And this is my newest Wonder Woman mug. This was a birthday gift in October from one of my coworkers, and it changes color all the way around, so it's kind of fun. So I'm
It's
drinking
very
tea.
impressive.
It's kind
Okay.
of fun, right? And I have
Yeah.
turmeric tea tonight, so I'm drinking the tea, but the non-caffeinated because I need to sleep at some point. So
Mine's with coffee, so I'm gonna balance it out with beer as soon as we're done, so that I can
you
go to
know,
sleep after.
there you go. I have actually on Saturdays. Sometimes I have bourbon in my mug, so it depends on what
Yeah.
time of day and who I'm talking to and what I have going on afterwards as to what's in my mug. So that's all fun. So tell us, how did you get started with WordPress? Why WordPress?
I started working with WordPress. I'd say like initially playing around with it. I still am not really sure what year it was. I've been telling people 2005 just to be safe, but it was in college. It was when I was just freelancing. I was doing some work for my job back home. Actually, I worked remotely while I was in school, but we were still using like old school PHP and MySQL sort of homegrown like CMSs where there was like very little content managed work at all. And actually a guy who I still work with, he's our sysadmin, kind of turned me onto it, and he said, you should check this out. It's got a templating system. It's not like super advanced. It's still mostly for blogging. And I think I ended up taking it and making like, I lived in a house with four or five other people at the time at school, and I was in art school. So we made like a blog for our house, and it was like, you know, the five of us would post. I mean, this is 2005. So this is like even, I think it was right when Facebook was coming out. So we would put stuff there before we had another place to post our drunken photos. So I started working with the templating system and the admin and like figuring out how to overwrite files and stuff like that. And then I kind of like took a hiatus from it for a few years as I like got through school and finished up my degree. And then subsequently after school, I got a job at an ad agency in Chicago, and they were doing still custom built ASP.NET type of content management systems and things like that. And I hated them. And, you know, like thinking back before WordPress and Squarespace was really popular, you really kind of were at the mercy of whatever admin system you're using. And like back then, our clients at this agency were paying my agency something like $15,000 a month in a retainer for us to update the content. And so what we did was we had a dev site and a production site, and we just like changed everything on the development site. They would go and review it and give us a million other changes that they, you know, had. And so this would be like a 30-hour process to get like 8 pages updated. And this is like part of what I did when I first started. And I just remember thinking, this is like insane. And there was a lot of like other tiny like startup type CMSs at the time that were trying to like break out, that were like kind of like visual, where you could, you know, kind of highlight and change text and change it on the front end, but nothing was really stable. So we used ASP.NET. That's like what the agency used, and I hated it. And the clients hated it, and it cost a ton of money to like continually update the site. So I could answer this question. I could take literally 45 minutes in your entire day. So eventually I got turned back into WordPress, and I was starting to mess around with themes. And then I hated my job so much that I started my own t-shirt company selling shirts. So naturally we needed to produce content to like attract people to the site, because we had no money. We didn't have money for ads, and we're selling shirts. So we used a blog to like make content about stuff. And it was a WordPress blog. And I did like a custom front end, and I actually matched it to our cause I was doing development during the day. So I matched the design to a Magento commerce store, and that's what our front end ran on for the store. And I mean, this is like before WooCommerce even. So I kind of just stuck with it, and it just kept getting continually better. And it sort of just always matched up with what I was doing at work. And then, I mean, if you fast forward, like this is like 10 years ago now. I've just been using it for my own throughout my career as I went to other companies. And now I'm on my own as a small agency. And that's pretty much all we use is WordPress, just because I've just known it for 10 years. And when you turn it over to an end user, a couple hours of training usually, and they're up to speed. They don't really need, you know, they don't need me and a $15,000 a month budget to run their own site. So And there's a lot more steps to the story in there, but that's sort of, I started just messing with it in college, and
Yeah.
it had a great templating system. And I was working with like 4 or 5 other templating systems that like no one's probably ever even heard of at the time, that are, I'm sure, still around to some extent. And WordPress was like just a ready-made up and go and drop a theme in, and here you go. And you have a site that's like, as good as anything. I could spend $100,000 of your money with a full agency team to like build one for you. So it's just only gotten better. So I've just kind of stuck with it.
When I was in college, I had a computer. I was the only person in the entire dormitory who had a computer. That's how long ago it was. And it was pin-fed .matrix printer that I would print my reports on and my papers. So we didn't have the internet back then. So,
we had internet, but we didn't have like almost no social media or anything.
Yeah. It's come a long way in a very short amount of time, really.
Maybe for the worse.
It's got its pluses and minuses, right? So
right.
Definitely.
Yeah, I could talk all day long. Like, I just think, like, one of the things that my team and I talk about, because we're all we're on the internet all day long. We're building stuff on the internet, and we're doing advertising on the internet. So like, we have a little more understanding of how a lot of like these technical systems work and how you can target people, and how it's great that we can target people who love, soccer and also love Oaxaca chocolate. Like, it's great that you can find those people, but we're also kind of on the other end of the spectrum where we think it's kind of privacy. It's not really congruent with privacy, a lot of the social networking stuff. So like, to me, like, the long-term stuff I love thinking about with WordPress is that, like, if it gets easy enough, or if it gets to this point where everyone can have a WordPress site, you kind of, you don't really need the centralized, social network that owns all the data anymore, because you can connect all these sort of federated systems. And so like, I think that's like years away, or even, I don't even know if it's possible. Like, it's interesting to think about, though, that for a system where you individually own the data that your system is on, and it's not used by some other company or sold to other companies, like, if people care about that, like, WordPress is interesting from that perspective, among like a million other things. So like, the more and more I like over intellectualize what I think about with WordPress and the internet, like, it just makes me like the idea of open source and having sort of independent content of your own that's on your own domain name, I guess.
It's going to be interesting to see where Tumblr goes now that it's associated with WordPress, or purchased by WordPress, so Automatic. So that'll be very interesting to see how those kinds of things start to align. And that's a social media, so, and it's microblogging and all those things kind of wrapped together. So definitely going to be interesting to see how that changes the market.
Yeah. I can't believe they bought it for like a few $1 million, and it was bought for like hundreds of millions. I don't even remember the exact purchase price, but
a lot.
It had a really good community of different people on it, like interesting, weird stuff, which I think that's like, actually go back to Reddit. Like, that's one of my favorite things about Reddit, is there are so many weird communities of people. Like, my friends and I still have this thing where, like, every time we get together, so you have to tell a friend of a new subreddit that you subscribe to that's really bizarre or interesting. And it's like, I have found some great subreddits, and like, you could go really way down the rabbit hole on some of those things. Like,
absolutely. And some nights I do, and I'm just laying there, insomnia hits, and I'm like, let's scroll Reddit and see where we go. It's a very, very interesting thing.
Yeah.
When you look at websites, whether they're your own or other people's, what do you think is something that we as, web builders and a web community don't focus enough attention on when we build websites that would make websites stronger and better?
Well, I'll frame it for, I guess, myself and like the work that I do. One of the things, I think that I work with a lot of small companies, even like the bigger clients I have, like, in my opinion, they're still small, because it's like a small division of a huge company. And I think there's a tendency to just it's the marketing departments. What the website's run by the marketing department or the marketing person. If it's a company that I work with, is usually one person. And it's just always like, the easiest tip I can always tell people, even for a WordPress developer type, is that it's like very me focused. Like, the websites tend to be very company focused. And sometimes I make the joke, it's just a giant fucking billboard. Oh, excuse me. Am I allowed to swear?
You can swear.
Okay.
Yeah. I don't think there's any kids that watch WP Coffee Talk, at least not yet.
Okay. So they just look like giant billboards in a lot of ways. And they don't have, I mean, sometimes users only want one thing out of your site. And it's, you know, for like a lot of our restaurant sites, like just give them the menu. Give them the menu and 5 food photos and a reservation link. And like, if you really need to have some other content or other stuff going on, then like put it there, but like kind of put it to the side.
Yeah. Tell me what hours you're open and what you serve.
Right. And then there are people like our big music festival client that we work with. I mean, I may as well plug them, right? It's Riot Fest. It's a Midwest music festival. And they actually used to have a festival in Brooklyn and one in Toronto for a while. But they were never putting out content about music. And they've been on WordPress since before I worked with them. And it was always like, you know, you have this WordPress site and it's like, it's there for generating content and stuff for people to read when they're bored and not thinking about buying a ticket to a music festival. And like your entire site is about selling a ticket to a music festival or to your club shows. And like, since this is like 4 or 5 years ago now, and you know, if you go to their site now, it's more content driven and it's like, it's about making things that people are interested in. So even for me as a developer who works on even my own site, which is like, I think pretty sales heavy in a lot of ways, thinking about what the customer actually wants out of it. And like, so that's why we've kind of transitioned to being more of like a resource company and just putting out stuff for other developers or, you know, people who are doing like low budget marketing, like putting a lot of our freebie stuff out there on our site is just a much more valuable use of the site. So I think content's probably the long-winded answer of something that we don't think about is the actual content that's going in there. And once you get into the really like nitty gritty sort of design conversation, it's about like, well, what information is most important or what pieces of our site are most important to get in front of people. And that's how you get like into a lot of the design system stuff. And I think a lot of WordPress people are heavier on usually either on the development side or the design side. And I think both sides kind of neglect the content, and then both of them together at the same time struggle with, well, how do I present content and how do I make it easy for people to find what they want out of me? And then, you know, I think for like, probably the biggest piece of advice that I would give to people that are in my field for their clients is if you can sell your client on things that will make their site make them money is another thing that people don't take into account. They just look at, well, you had an about page, a menu page, a corporate policy page and a press page before. So now we're going to give you the same 4 or 5 pages and they're going to be prettier. And our whole thing is always like, what are the 1 or 2 pieces here that you have that people would visit your site for who don't know they're looking for you? And that's another thing that we focus on. So for like our music festival client, it's like, what is the good music to listen to? I don't have 40 hours a week to listen to music. I've got 1 hour maybe to look for it. And if they already know all the stuff I like, then, you know, that's to me is sort of the gap in what people don't think about is like, you have all this inherent knowledge about cool things and you're not putting it on your site in any place. So, I mean, I could be a lesson of that for myself, just simply because our site is very thin on content, and like some of the best things we have to give away for free just to compete.
Yeah, that makes it hard sometimes, but that's kind of our ecosystem too, I guess. When you think back over the time you've been using WordPress since the beginning almost, like what's something that you wish you'd learned about WordPress earlier on that would have made the rest of the time that you've been working in WordPress maybe a little easier?
Wow. I forgot I should have thought harder about this question. So I think for me, like I'm self-taught. So I am definitely on and even I'm probably on the design side, on the front end side. But like everything I know, I learned on my own. I didn't really ever take classes or anything. I have like a film degree, which does very little for me as a developer or designer. But the big thing I'd say, like, since I'm doing a lot of coding, like our block plugin that we have, all the front end, all the CSS, and I had, there's 3 or 4 other people who help, but everyone did like one piece, and I'm still writing a lot of code. So for me, the big thing that was never really taught to me the right way was picking a tool set and then teaching to troubleshoot. I had to learn that on my own. And I have to admit, like a lot of my pains over the years of ripping my hair out trying to learn a development concept, whether it's complicated things like object-oriented programming or now React and learning how a totally different back-end ecosystem works for editing, like that's been really challenging. And if I had learned years ago when I first started, like, here's how you troubleshoot, like, here's how you debug, here's how you install a debugger, there's all these things out there. And there's a lot of really good, like, programmer humor, like, types of memes. That's a good subreddit plug.
Yes.
about like troubleshooting the lazy way and not doing it right. I wish someone had shown me a long time ago, like how to do object-oriented programming from scratch, like how to do JavaScript the right way, like teaching me really good development patterns, and then ultimately debugging. Like even if you don't know coding, learning how to debug an error or figure out what's wrong when your site is the white screen of death. Like I think you just save yourself hundreds of hours of pain and suffering. And honestly now for us, that's a really big driver of new business is like, our site is broken. Can you fix it? And I can look at it and go, yeah, I know exactly what's wrong. They didn't disable Gutenberg and their editing system is all short codes now and it's gibberish, but it looks like spaghetti code to them. And I know, deactivate Gutenberg, activate VS Composer, and, read the error log to see if there's any other things conflicting. And then, learning that stuff from someone would have saved me hundreds of hours, I think.
Lots of headache for sure. Yeah, it is.
Yeah,
it is interesting. Go ahead.
Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you. The other thing I had was trying to use plugins to get done what you need to get done. Like there's like a line you got to draw in the sand where I can't use a plugin for this. I'm downloading, installing random things in my site that I've never tested. So like I've made that mistake too and had some untested plugins that like they looked great and they worked, and then a week later my whole site was broken and I couldn't figure out why, and it was like some insane bug. So that was another one. Just trying to rely on too many plugins and not really understanding them is another, I think, common mistake that WordPress people make.
Yeah, and just because it's in the repository doesn't mean that it's the right plugin or that it's being supported, and you got to read all the in between the lines on those kinds of things. It makes it hard for sure.
I have tied my destiny to premium plugins before that were terribly coded that I was then responsible for maintaining, and like without naming any names, like a catalog plugin that I used before I used WooCommerce catalog, that it had everything I wanted. And I didn't have time. I didn't have time to spec it out, bought it, put it on the site, and I had to customize a bunch of it a year later, and it was a disaster. It was like a giant echoed statement and, thousands of lines of code, and it was just a disaster.
Yeah. It's worth the time to vet these things to make sure that they are working for us the right way. Absolutely.
Right. And then on the other end of the spectrum, is the developer, because I suffer from this. My developer that I work with most often suffers from this, or there's trying to develop a plugin yourself and trying to make the world's like perfect new framework. That's another like good, like common programmer problem is like, there's 20 import plugins. Why did we need to make our own import plugin?
Right. For sure. Now I know that you've been involved in at least one WordCamp because we were both at WordCamp US this year. But when you think back over the different WordPress events, whether they're WordCamps, meetups, other kinds of things, what's a moment or two that was kind of a pivotal moment for you, or like an inspiration for you that you can look back to and say that made a difference to me?
So, is it okay if it's not a WordCamp?
Yeah.
Okay. Because I started going to WordCamps pretty late. Like I went to my first WordCamp Chicago, I think 2 or 3 years ago. So by then I was like, we'd already been making WordPress products, and a couple of the the talks I went to at my first WordCamps were like, they were informative, but it was like, they just scratched the surface of the things that my team and I were trying to learn about. So especially with like Gutenberg and the new editing system, which has been our focus the last, like pretty much actually the last like 2 years, I guess you could say. I felt like there wasn't much for me at the WordCamp, but the WordCamp US I felt was great, but it was obviously my first one was a month ago. So my example, and I thought hard about this because when I was first starting to go to conventions, it was 2001, I think was the year. But I went to, I don't know if you heard of Flash Forward, if you remember that conference. It was Macromedia Flash's conference. So before Adobe bought Flash, it was owned by Macromedia. They had a conference called Flash Forward. I had a Flash resource website in the 2000s when I was in high school, and it got on TV, and it had like, I was getting more traffic to that website than any of the sites I've ever worked on since. It was like 5,000 unique visitors a day for Flash, for tutorials on how to use Flash. So we went to this Flash conference, and I went there as an exhibitor, not an exhibitor, like a sponsor, a gold sponsor, because we promoted it enough and I got a bunch of free passes. So my mom flew out there with me and dropped me off at the convention center in New York. And the first speaker was this guy named Joshua Davis. And I'll never forget it because I didn't know what to expect. I was a teenager. I'd never been to a conference, a tech conference or anything. And this guy gets up there, this Joshua Davis guy, never heard of him. I think I knew of his site at the time, but I didn't really know much about him. And he gets up there and gives a presentation about finding inspiration as a designer and where to find inspiration from. And he didn't show I think he showed a little bit of his work at the end, but almost the entire talk was about like, where do you find inspiration from? And this was before like BuzzFeed and top 500 free WordPress resource design, inspirational Pinterest board things. So his presentation, it sounds a little bit inappropriate when I describe it, but he talks about this artist that did portraits of people. And what they did is they burned cork and they painted their whole faces black, like dark soot black, so that all you saw was their eyes. And he talked about how he was inspired by that. So he cuts to a video of himself. He goes, let's watch this video real quick. And I'd never seen anyone do that before either. And he cuts to a video of himself painting blackface on himself so that you could see his eyes. And he's talking about how it changed his perspective on how he looked at people, because it focused everything in on the focal point of your eyes, and it made them look really bright and intense. And he followed that up with experimental, he was a big experimental like animator. And if you look at his website today, like he's still doing like opening title sequences for like the World Cup, and it's like all sorts of other great, huge projects that everyone's probably seen. So he's still doing that, but you can see from his work that he got inspired from some really weird places, of course. So at the end of this talk, he in his video, he takes out these colored eye drops, and he's like, I've been trying to see the world from a different view, to see different colors and how I can incorporate this into some of my experimental animation work with Flash. And he takes this little like, straight out of the box from a grocery store, like food coloring dye. And he goes, bloop, bloop. And he puts in his eyes a different colors or the same colors. And it looks so painful. And he's just blinking his way through the rest of this video. And sure enough, he's walking around looking at things with food coloring in his eyes.
Wow.
And ultimately, like, I don't know, people were just laughing hysterically at his presentation. And like, I walked away with that, not only learning about like, this is how you do a presentation, because I'll never forget it. And it was the talk through the whole weekend, but he also talked about his work, like just at the little tail end piece of it, and showed off what he was doing and his team's thing. And he said, I'll be in my hotel room on the 9th floor in like 45 minutes if anyone wants to come by. And I like called my mom, met her outside. I was like, Mom, I need $40. He's selling this thing upstairs. And I literally like jumped in the elevator and went upstairs and bought his, whatever he had, his like DVD of, he literally gave away all of his source files of his experimental work. And he's like, check it out. I just dumped it all into a drive. I made a cool CD case for it. It looked like a PlayStation at the time or something like that. And I was just like completely blown away. And to this day, I've never really been to a conference or a convention where a talk like even came into the like stratosphere of what that one did. But like,
that sounds so cool.
So like, I hate not having a WordPress because I've had some really, really informative and great WordPress talks, but like most of the time it was like, yeah, I agree with that guy. He's saying what I think.
Yeah.
So I guess it wasn't like, whoa, like really knocking, my socks off with how innovative it was. And then I think like part of the other thing is that like, I make this joke a lot with my coworkers and people I know. It's like, I just think what we do is like, it's fun, but we're not on like live PD arresting people on television, right? So like, how do you make it exciting and cool? We're talking about, object-oriented programming and React. Like, is anyone really going to jump out of their seat and just like lose their mind and like spike their coffee mug about that? Like, I mean, if they do, great. Like, you're the world's greatest motivational speaker if you can
absolutely
get people psyched about Gutenberg editing,
Speaking of Gutenberg editing, I've looked into it a little bit because you shared some things with me, but tell the world about the plugin that you guys have developed and what it does, because it looks phenomenal.
So it is, looking at it now, like I'm still really proud of it. Like if no one downloads it and no one likes it, we still will use it all the time. So what we basically did was we had a bunch of tools, just like most small agencies do. Like you either have your choice, like places that you download from, whether it's underscores or roots or whatever is your sort of starting point. And then, some people buy like a premium theme that's already ready to go. For us, it's kind of like a mixture of, it sort of depends on the person that's working with us. If it's a friend of a friend, usually it's one of our themes, it's very minimal. If it's a company, it's built from scratch. It's like, it's got nothing there when we start. And then, you know, for people who need a ton of things, they're like, dude, I need all this stuff and I've got like $5,000. We might push them in the direction of either another agency or like a freelancer who can put together a couple of WordPress themes. So that was like old WordPress, and it worked really well for a bunch of years. And like, you know, there's a huge theme marketplace and a lot of really developed code examples and blah, 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 blah. But for us, what we learned is that our clients were typically, the one signing the check is not the one editing the site. And the person editing the site is usually a person that is very similar to the other people we have editing sites. They're usually younger, tech savvy, et cetera, but they still struggle with some of the more non-visual cues in the admin to what they're seeing on the front end. So like a Squarespace site to them is easier than a custom field-based site or a visual composer-based site, or even like Beaver Builder and Divi, even though those tools are like phenomenal and like so good. But there's still like, there's a learning curve, and not everyone's a WordPress person. And like what I learned over the last like 5 years of running, or I guess 7 years now of doing this on my own, is that almost none of my customers came into the process with WordPress as a solution. So like I'm giving them their solution, and I want to present to them the best solution possible that will make their lives easier. And if their primary focus is like editing page content and uploading videos and photos and promoting their stuff and maybe producing content and articles, then like it needs to be as easy as possible. And usually if they're willing to spend money on it, then it's got a really good design and it works really well. So what we've made, in my really long-winded answer, is it's a combination of tools that we use for our sites. So there's a starter theme. It's based on underscores. We actually started with a library called Understrap. Have you heard of Understrap? No. So it's Bootstrap and underscores combined. Okay. So there's a great library. If no one's ever heard of it, go check it out. We started with that. It's got build tools for developers for like NPM and all these other like not hardcore, but for like version tracking and for linting your code. And the problem was it didn't have any Gutenberg integration whatsoever. So it used like what I'd call like old WordPress sort of design patterns, where you have a widget that powers your slider. You know, you don't have a drag and drop slider. You have like a widget that you upload images to. So what we did is we took that, we stripped out all the Understrap stuff. We gave it a better starting theme framework. So it's got like Helvetica fonts. And then we made a plugin that is kind of like the focal point of it all, that it basically takes Bootstrap and all of the things that come with Bootstrap and puts them into a naked version of the wireframing process, so that you can pick a number of columns, or you can pick a pre-built layout and drop it into your starter theme and basically build out an entire website with either the pre-built landing pages or the individual section templates. And so like all the content that we have is about some that's like starting from a blank white screen, and I'll literally build the whole thing from scratch using our blocks and WordPress core blocks. And then sort of the magic happens when you apply a style guide for it. So I don't know if you do any reading about like a lot of these people saying that WordPress themes are dead, or that there's like a big movement to like phase out themes. Like, I don't think that's going to happen, but a theme to me has always been a style guide, a brand style guide of fonts, colors, buttons, form fields, any like component of a website that matches the brand. So we basically, what we made is we have the layout component. That's the engine for driving how you build pages and how you can start from templates. And then we have a starter theme that normalizes and gives you like a from stock. It basically looks like a Squarespace site where it's like black and white. And then the third piece of it is this client folder that lives sort of underneath a child theme, so that if you want to make it your own, which is what we're hoping people do, that they just make a bunch of like changes to the front end style guide in this client folder, and then they've basically got a theme that they could submit to WordPress.org, and all they have to worry about is really everything below the header and the footer where the content is. So we made the system because we needed it for ourselves, and essentially our process now is going through and building out layouts for the client and then saving them as reusable blocks. And then our training becomes, here's how you drop in your header layout, here's how you drop in your, your product grid layout, and we'll actually build all these layouts for them. And it's all in this sort of modal in the back end that you don't need it to be a designer. You just need to be able to look at either a page template icon or a section template and go, I need, 2 paragraphs and a heading and 4 images and a video, and I can make this layout work. So it's like, we basically try to take ourselves as a little agency and build ourselves into a system so that if we didn't exist at a company, that the person there can still make marketing decisions and have a landing page that matches their brand identity, that doesn't look like, you know, a cookie cutter WordPress site. So sort of it's like a 3-piece system. There's I guess there's an admin plugin that collapses the admin nav and sort of opens up the screen and gives you more editing space. And then it renames some of the labels in the back end. Like, we've had clients who have issues with about 4 or 5 parts of the WordPress back end. One thing is like image uploading. One is, you know, like seeing a ton of error messages or upload messages and stuff. And it's like, what is all this? Do I need to update these things? So we have an admin plugin that hides all that and makes our users' lives a little bit easier. And then we reskin the back end to just make it cleaner and like not look like stock WordPress, I guess. So some of the things that were hidden, like the navigation links, I think is hidden. It's under the appearance menus. And that's like, if you're a regular user, I'm just trying to change my navigation link to the header. So our admin plugin makes the admin a little bit easier to use. Our starter theme is there to like brand and reskin. And then the blocks plugin is there to sort of drive the page building experience. And then what was the last piece of this? I guess like the goal for us is to just eventually have like 10 or 12 different themes where it's just the header and the footer are different and like a different style guide. And then it's got the same other core plugins that work with it. So like, as an example, our blocks plugin right now works with the 2020 theme and the 2019 theme.
Oh, nice.
The difference is it just doesn't have, you know, you're embedding a lot of the grid-based part of the code into the plugin then. So like, it probably should be used with the Bootstrap theme, preferably. But it works with, like, you could make it work with any theme is sort of our thought. So it's not like something you're going to install because you need like the one block. Like if you need the tabs block or the toggle block, like you probably shouldn't use our thing. But if you have like no idea what you're doing and you're just using an underscores as a starting point and you're like still using like the classic editor plugin, which we still are on a lot of our sites. But like our customers, the difference in like the Gutenberg powered system versus like advanced custom fields is, as much as I try to make our old system as easy on them as possible, like it is so much easier for them to like use the site. So they're using it more. And we're not supporting it. Like I'm not dealing with like, how do I do the one thing that I do one day a year? Cause it's like a buried, you know, setting on a page that like I barely remember. So the system is like, it's sort of like our tool set before our client pays us like 15 grand to make them a custom theme. And so I don't know, like if that will become like, I don't know if it's worth anything. Like there are a lot of really good blocks plugins. And ours is certainly, you know, we've certainly studied what's out there and customized some of them from what we've found just because we liked what we saw. But to us, like what was missing was, like, I really don't think most people are starting from a blank white screen when they're building it. Like they're probably starting with a pre-built theme that's ready or a thing that has like all these layouts built in. So our plugin does that. Like you can literally build an entire site in 3 minutes just by clicking on our page templates and having the inserter insert them. So to me, like that's always sort of, you know, just going back to what we were saying earlier, to me, that's like it mirrors the design process for web design, you know, where you start with a wireframe process, usually with the client. Like we've tried to replace that because like our clients have 15 grand for their whole site. And like, you know, when I was at an agency, we had 150 grand. So it was like, you need to cover a lot of ground quickly. And the other part of the reason why we jumped on board with Gutenberg is just, if this is how it's going to be for the next 10 years, like I wanted to make sure that we were there right away so that we get longevity out of people using it, because in my opinion, most of the sites that we build get flipped over in 4 or 5 years, either because the marketing team changes in place or because they have some new marketing initiative that they're working on. So like making sure that we had something that was going to last for 5 years is another thing that we jumped all over. And then I was like, you know what? I like many people in the WordPress community, I have stolen and used free plugins so much that like we had to find a way to like give everything that we've done and give it back to people, because like I have like 15 years of working with front ends and websites. Like that's one thing that I was put on this earth to do, I can make a lot of other people's lives easier by giving them, you know, a 7-month head start on it.
Yeah.
So that's sort of like, I guess, the 25-minute answer to your question.
That's awesome. At the end, we'll get the roundup of how people can find all these things. So so hang on till the end, people, and we'll give you some links to find all the different plugins and things that Tim is talking about. Let me move on to my rapid fire questions with you, so I can respect your time tonight, and we can kind of see where you land on some of these fun questions. If you were teaching somebody to build their own website, what are 2 to 3 must-have plugins that you would recommend?
Am I teaching them to build the site, or is it just like a thing that I recommend for all WordPress people?
Let's just say for all WordPress people.
So, okay. So the simple ones for me, besides my own plugin, the C9 Blocks plugin, is I got 3. One is the SEO framework. I used to love Yoast. I just got sick of the upselling, like, and it just confuses my customers. And I think a lot of well, without getting too opinionated about it, it confuses people. So SEO framework is a minimal, it gets the job done, it gets the XML sitemap, it's all that you need. It's great, use that. The second one is auto optimize, because it does a great job of handling minification and combining JavaScript files and making your site fast. So using the right settings to auto optimize, you can get a really good page speed score. And then the third thing is Cloudflare, or some sort of CDN, or something that will distribute your site around the internet. And we use that for all of our high traffic music festival sites that get pummeled by traffic a few times a year. So it has to be either load balanced or distributed or something like that. So those are my 3 that like go on every single site no matter what. And it's like every 6 months that shifts a little bit to different ones.
Sure. And I think that's true for all of us.
Yeah.
At any point in your WordPress journey, have you had a mentor, whether it was an official mentor or unofficial mentor, and who was it?
Yeah, so I've never really had a mentor per se that like was official, and he probably wouldn't even admit to being this, but my sysadmin, Ron, who got me into WordPress, has kind of always been my sort of de facto mentor on things. He's the one who introduced me to WordPress and Linux, and like he got me to learn things, period. Like I remember when something would go wrong, whether it was a thing I did or a plugin or a server issue, he was like, Google it. Google the error message. Like he taught me, one of the many people who pushed me into troubleshooting and figuring things out on my own, which ultimately put me in this position where I'm constantly learning new things, and it just, it stays in my brain and I can't forget it. So shout out to Ron, who is a great sysadmin.
What's Ron's
Ron is on Twitter.
Name?
Ron Guerin. He used to be a member of the New York Linux users group. I don't know how active he is anymore, but he does all of our sysadmin stuff. He keeps all of our WordPress sites really safe, and he's always been someone who's been really good at teaching me like realistic versus idealistic, which is something that tech people and IT people really, really struggle with. And he was always someone who was really good at that. So it'd be Ron Guerin.
Awesome.
Shout out to Ron.
Shout out to Ron. Other than Ron, who's somebody that you admire in the WordPress community, and why?
So I have like a little bit of a brown noser answer here. I'm sure you get this a lot, but one of them is this guy, Justin Tadlock. I don't know if you've heard of him. He doesn't know who I am. I don't think he knows who I am at all, but I've followed him for years, and it mostly, like, I had to write this all down. He oversees a part of the process of WordPress that it is very difficult to oversee, as far as like theme reviews and making sure that people understand it. And like, he also takes an opinion in the community when people say things that like that are equally frustrating and irritating about WordPress. But like, I'm kind of on the ship has sailed, and like, I think we should move forward and work on the new WordPress. And I think they've done a pretty good job of staying like backwards compatible with old WordPress, but like, and he always takes a stance on, understood, it's frustrating, and he does a really good job of communicating like what he thinks themes are going to be and how the design, you know, is isolated from the database. And like a lot of the really like over intellectualized things I like to think about, he comments publicly on, and I'm usually too scared to. So that's one. And then the other one's Matt Mullenweg for pretty much the same reasons. It's like, and there's even like, you know, if you want to go a couple moves down on the chess table, people getting upset about getting called out on being upset for not liking change. Like that is something that people also get upset about. And I think they've all done a pretty, like, while I may have thought things were rushed a little bit, they do a good job of selling the future. And I think they're overseeing these huge, like, distributed teams. And I just really admire that, because I have a small team, and sometimes I manage them when they're in the space around me. And it's like the hardest part of the job is to do your job and to manage people. And I think those two people do a really good job of, like, communicating high level priorities, even when it sort of, maybe they can't consider just the developers or just the designers at all times. So those two would be my long-winded answer.
Fantastic. What's something you'd still like to learn in WordPress but you haven't tackled yet?
So I've tackled this a little bit, but using React, getting better at it. I'm still not good enough at it to, like, write my own code, and that bothers me a lot. I'm someone who is, like, really, really good with jQuery and kind of comfortable with my jQuery and my super simple libraries that I use for everything. And it's been a definite learning curve, and having to go back and learn, like, functional programming. So that's still on my list so that I can troubleshoot this. But like every day, it's like, am I gonna go off in the strategic direction, or am I gonna, like, continue to learn the development concepts? And, like, I still want to learn React just because it seems really powerful, and it seems like that's how it's going to be. So I may as well learn it.
What's the biggest mistake you've ever made in WordPress, and what did you learn from it?
So I think I might have said this a little bit earlier, but it's probably using plugins that, like, I thought I had a good handle on, that ultimately, because of just the ghosts in the machine, I guess, it just catastrophically melted down on me over time. And, like, the example I have, I think I was using a caching plugin, and I was using a Cloudflare CDN plugin with a plugin that was putting in related posts at the bottom of my blog post, and it would rebuild the related items algorithm type stuff when new material was posted. So what ended up happening is I also had something in there that was doing auto posts of, like, I think it was like a thread of, like, my tweets or something that I was like, I don't know what I was doing. But what happened was it ultimately, and my site would go to a crawl after like a week, and it was because it would just have errors and silently fail, and then it would load up my error logs and load up all sorts of other things in the server, and then the server would get caught trying to generally, like, circularly regenerate these related items, and I had no clue, and it was because I just didn't know what I was doing, and I was just using like 5 plugins, and it took up like 40 or 50 hours of my time, because every time I'd log in, clear stuff out, you know, it's good to go, and then it'd be back. So it was just a disaster. So I think a lot of WordPress people make the mistake of using, not being scared of just learning the settings, or being scared of learning, like, the right way to do it, and just trying to fix things with you know, 50 plugins. And it's just a disaster for people like me to have to, you know, unravel that bird's nest.
Yes, especially when at some point there's an update to one, and now it causes all these plugin conflicts that can even white screen you, and you're like, oh my gosh. And you and I know how to fix that, but other people don't know how to fix that. So
right. And I mean, it even got to a point where, like, look, my company, I used to give everybody, like, where do you want your site to host it at? I'll put it there. And we stopped doing that. And now we host all of the sites, because it was like, who do you think they're going to call anyway when things fall apart? Like, they're going to call me. So now it's like maintenance and all that is up to me. And it's funny how much you are, like, I mean, development operations is not something that, like, I knew anything about. But now I know a lot about. Like, I know we're doing the version control, and, you know, we've got, you know, Git hooks for updating 30 websites. Like, we don't have it all perfect yet, but, like, just because you can literally bury yourself in unpaid support work or unpaid busy work that, you know, you're not getting paid for. So
What's your proudest WordPress moment?
Besides getting the blocks plugin that we just released, like, I don't know how hard things are to get accepted to the WordPress starter repo, but, like, our plugin got accepted, and I was, like, so proud of that. So, like, that's probably most recently. But before that, my first, like, big music festival website launch, where my website like, I did it by myself, and, like, I worked, like, an insane amount of time on it to establish myself with this new client. And they had never had a website stay online for a big concert announce. Like, it always crashed. And if you ever work in like the big concert sales bit, like all the sales happen and you're on sale. And then like during your single day announcement, there's like 2 or 3 windows that all the big pops of sales happen. And one of them is right when they go on. So you get those impulse buys. So it's important that the site stays on. So the first time I had a site go up that was getting just pummeled by traffic, it stayed online the whole time. And I was like so pumped that, and you know, they subsequently got a lot of better marketing from that because we put people to the site versus sending them right to a ticket processor. So we got like a bunch of email subscribers, and
that's awesome.
we got a bunch of really good marketing data that we could target people about later with. And we kind of were able to like launch the content side of the site to show people that like, yeah, we're selling tickets to this event. That's one weekend a year, but we write about music all year long. And it's like really good written content that if you don't have time to find your own music, like you should read it. So that was like something I was proud of, just because I mean, the whole Midwest, it like trends on Twitter, and like everyone in the Midwest who likes rock music goes to the site at the same time. And I was just like, you know, it had like an animated carousel on there, and like, oh my God, it was like, I think I literally worked through the night to finish it on time. And I was just like, thank God it launched.
Thank goodness, for sure. If you weren't working in web tech, all of the, you know, what you do now, what's another career that you might like to attempt?
I think I would be, I've talked about this before, but like if I ever had, I'm going to swear again. if I ever had fuck you money is what I like to call it, where like I don't have to work, I think I would try to go, I think I'd try to go back and get a law degree, like just to get a degree, pass the bar, and then help people who like who have either like one of the things that I've dealt with as a small business owner is like litigious people who either threaten to sue you, or people who don't pay you that you have to get a lawyer to get to go after, or contracts you have to write for your work, or just there's a million things that I don't think small business owners know about, especially if you have experience in tech and doing web design or development or marketing. Like I think there's a lot of small companies that get taken advantage of for a lot of different reasons because of the legal side and the agreements that they know nothing about. And I've always loved that. And I have this sort of obsessive mind for it, but I can't imagine doing it unless it was like, I didn't need to get paid. It was for free. And like, it was for like the, you know, Electronic Frontier Foundation, or, you know, someone who I cared about.
So what's something on your bucket list?
I didn't really have anything good for this. I honestly, this is a new one, is learning to play guitar, because I love music. I work in the music industry in some capacity. I go to live music a lot. I can't play a single instrument. I don't know how to play any musical instruments whatsoever. Like I can read music, but I can't play them. So I'd love to learn just to play like a couple of Queen songs and like a couple of solos, and then that's it. Put the headphones on, play the riffs for a few minutes, and then, you know, take them off, put the guitar back.
There you go. Show us or tell us about one of your hidden talents that the WordPress community might not know about you.
Oh, I mean, I guess this can build on the last one. So like, I still don't know how to play any real musical instruments, but that old video game Rock Band, I could play the drums on Rock Band on expert level on like 85-90% of the songs on the video game, but couldn't play any of the like actual music in real life, nor could I read the music or anything. So like spent a lot of time for some reason learning all those songs and how to play, and like, but don't know how to play. So hidden talent.
There you go. Usually our hidden talents aren't going to make us any money, but they were fun, right?
I mean, we used to win a bunch of those, like, you know, best rock band competitions on like Tuesday nights at the bar, where we, you know, I have a whole bunch of Jägermeister branded backpacks and stuff now, but like, no money.
No money. Tell us how we find you. How do we find your company? How do we find your plugin, social media, all that?
So I'm on, I'm only on Twitter. I'm not on any other social networks. Toomey blog is my Twitter handle. It's like, I think I just had my 13th Twitter birthday, so it's really old. And then my company is Covert 9, and it's spelled out Covert 9, and it's on Twitter and Facebook. And we don't really post much. Like we've got maybe a couple things out to like promote our plugin, but if you Google Covert 9, all of our stuff will come up.
And how do people find you in the WordPress plugin directory?
If you just type in C9 blocks, we should come up, and it's the one that has less than 10 installs. So like, if there's another C9 block, it's the one that no one's downloaded yet, but I promise it's not malware and it's safe and it's a really good plugin.
Very good. Thanks so much for being here today. It's great to meet you. You know, we've
Nice meeting you
been
as well.
Redditing back and forth, but it's nice to actually put a face with the Reddit name. And I won't out you. I won't tell everybody else who your Reddit name is, but
it's pretty close to my regular name, so I don't mind. I don't need the anonymity. It's Timmy Blob on Reddit.
Yeah, mine are These Are Jazz Hands, I think is what mine are.
Yeah.
I couldn't think of anything else. But yeah, I've already outed myself enough times on Reddit that people know who I am, which is fine. But yeah, but thanks for being here tonight. Thanks for sharing about your new plugin and all the success that your company's had. And you know, hopefully next time we're at the same WordCamp, we can say hello now because we know each other. So
I will probably be at every single one going forward because it was so much fun. So
there, but I'm an organizer for this next year, so I will definitely be there too. So very
Excellent.
good.
Well, I'll see you there. Cool.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks again for being here tonight. And you know, we'll see you all around the Twitter land and the WordPress circuit. Have a good night. Thanks for being here.
Take it easy.
Bye-bye.